I'm 76 years old, and my phone hasn't rung in 3 weeks. Not from my daughter, not from my son, not even a text message asking if I'm still alive. I know exactly why. For years I told myself they were busy, that they had their own lives, that I'd raised them to be independent, and this was just proof I'd done my job right. But that's not the truth.
The truth is, I taught them I didn't have time for them, and now they're returning the lesson. I sit here in this house, the same house where they grew up, and I can go days without hearing another human voice except my own. Sometimes I turn on the TV just to remember what conversation sounds like. People my age, we talk a lot about legacy. Please like and subscribe to my channel and share with your friends.
I'm leaving behind silence. And the worst part? I earned it. Let me take you back, not to some dramatic moment. There wasn't one. That's the problem. It was 1,000 small moments that didn't seem to matter at the time. I was 32 when my daughter was born. Emily, 7 pounds, dark hair, lungs that could wake the whole hospital. My son came 2 years later, Michael, quieter, easier, always watching everything with these serious eyes. I loved them. I need you to understand that. I loved them the way any parent loves their children, fiercely, without question. But I was building something. I had started my own business the year before Emily was born, a consulting firm. I was good at what I did. I was going to provide for my family the way my father never provided for us. My father had been present but poor, always home, never had anything to give us. I watched my mother stretch every dollar until it screamed. I watched them fight about money until words became the only currency they had left. I wasn't going to be that man. So I worked. I worked early mornings before the kids woke up. I worked late nights after they went to bed. I worked weekends while my wife took them to the park. "You're missing it," she'd say sometimes. "Missing what?" I'd ask. "They're babies. They won't remember any of this." God, I was so sure of that. The business grew. We moved to a bigger house, better cars, private schools. I was winning. Emily's first words? I wasn't there. I was in a meeting in Chicago. Michael's first steps? I was on a conference call in the home office with the door locked. Emily's kindergarten graduation? I showed up 15 minutes late because a client called. My wife stopped asking me to come to things after a while. "Just focus on work," she'd say. "I'll handle it." And I did. I focused. I built that company into something real, something valuable. We had everything. Everything except time. But time was something I thought I could buy back later, when things settled down, when the business was stable, when I'd proven myself. I kept saying when. When the company goes public, I'll slow down. When the kids are in college, we'll reconnect. When I retire, we'll make up for lost time. The kids adapted. Of course they did. Children are flexible like that. Emily stopped asking me to come to her piano recitals. She'd just tell me about them after, briefly, over dinner. "It went well," she'd say. "That's great, sweetheart," I'd reply, already thinking about tomorrow's presentation. Michael stopped showing me his drawings. He'd leave them on the kitchen counter, hopeful, and when I didn't notice for days, he'd quietly throw them away. I didn't notice that either. My wife did all the heavy lifting. She went to parent-teacher conferences alone. She drove them to soccer practice and dance class and birthday parties. She held them when they cried. She celebrated when they succeeded. I signed the checks. I thought that was enough. I thought providing was the same as being present. Let me tell you something about teenage years. That's when kids decide who you are to them. Emily became distant around 14. Not rebellious, distant. She was polite, respectful. We'd have perfectly pleasant conversations about nothing. How was school? Fine. Need anything? No, I'm good. She stopped trying to tell me things that mattered. She learned I wasn't really listening anyway. Michael got into Yale, full scholarship. I was so proud. I took him to dinner to celebrate, just the two of us. I thought it would be this great father-son moment. I spent the whole dinner on my phone. 3 different work emergencies. I kept saying, sorry, just one more minute. He sat there and ate his steak in silence. When I finally put the phone down, I asked him if he was excited about college. Yeah, he said, it'll be good to get away. I thought he meant away from high school. He meant away from me. My wife got sick when I was 58. Breast cancer. Stage 3. That was the first time in 26 years I actually stopped working. I took a leave of absence. I went to every appointment. I held her hand through chemotherapy. I learned to cook because she couldn't keep food down. For 9 months, I was present. She went into remission. We celebrated. I thought we'd beaten it. And then I went right back to work. The company needs me, I said. I need you, she said. But she said it quietly. She didn't fight. She'd learned years ago that the company always won. Emily was in grad school by then. Michael was working in Boston. They called their mother every week. They called me on my birthday. Maybe. I told myself this was normal. Kids grow up, they move away, they have their own lives. But that wasn't it. They moved away from her too, physically, but they stayed connected. They moved away from me in every sense that mattered. The cancer came back 3 years later. Stage 4 this time. The doctors said months, maybe a year with treatment. I took leave again, real leave. I told my partners I was stepping back. Those last 8 months, I finally gave her what I should have given her all along. My time, my attention, my presence. We'd sit together in the evenings, not talking much, just being. Why didn't we do this before? She asked once. I didn't have an answer. The kids came home for the end, both of them. They took turns sitting with her, reading to her, playing music she loved. They were so good with her, so gentle, so present. Everything I hadn't been. She died on a Tuesday morning in April. The dogwoods were blooming outside the bedroom window. I was holding her hand. Emily was on the other side of the bed. Michael was at the foot, his hand on his mother's ankle. In that moment, the 3 of us were united in our grief. I thought maybe this would bring us closer. I thought tragedy might give us a second chance. The funeral was on a Saturday morning. Hundreds of people came. My wife had touched so many lives. Her book club, the women from church, parents from the kids' schools, kids who were grown now coming to pay respects. Her best friend gave the eulogy. Not me. Emily had asked me if I wanted to speak. I said yes, but when I tried to write something the night before, I sat at my desk for 3 hours and couldn't find the words. I couldn't summarize 43 years of marriage when I'd only been fully present for maybe 2 of them. So her friend spoke instead. She talked about my wife's kindness, her patience, the way she made everyone feel seen. She had this ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the room, her friend said. I'd never made anyone feel that way, not even my own children. After the funeral, people came back to the house, the same house where we'd raised the kids, where I'd worked in my office while life happened around me. Emily and Michael moved through the crowd gracefully, accepting condolences, thanking people for coming. I stood in the corner of my own living room like a guest. At one point, Emily brought me a plate of food. "You should eat something, Dad." "I'm not hungry." She set the plate down on the side table and walked away. That was the most intimate moment we had all day. People started leaving around 7. By 8, it was just the 3 of us. Emily was packing up leftover food. Michael was taking out trash. Nobody asked me to help. They'd learned long ago not to rely on me for the small, necessary things. "I'm going to head out," Michael said around 9. "Tonight?" I asked. "I thought you were staying through the weekend." "I have work Monday. It's a 6-hour drive. You could leave early tomorrow." He looked at Emily. Some silent communication passed between them. "I really should get going," he said. He hugged his sister, a real hug, long and tight. Then he turned to me and offered his hand. I shook it. My son's mother had just died, and we shook hands. Emily stayed 2 more days. She organized things, sorted through her mother's clothes, called the lawyer about the will, made lists of things that needed to be done. She was efficient, capable. We barely spoke. On her last morning, she made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table together. "You'll be okay?" she asked. "I'll be fine. The casserole in the fridge is good for about 5 days. I labeled everything in the freezer." "Thank you. I'll call next week to check in." She did call, once, a brief conversation. "How are you doing?" "Managing." "Okay, let me know if you need anything." "I will." She didn't call the week after that, or the week after that. I didn't call her either. This is what I'm trying to explain. The distance didn't happen because of the funeral. It happened over 30 years of me being physically present but emotionally absent. The funeral just made it visible. I sold the company 6 months after my wife died. 73 years old, finally retired. All that time I'd been promising myself, all those whens, finally here, and I was alone. I called Emily to tell her about the sale. "That's great, Dad," she said, polite, distant. "I thought maybe we could have dinner, celebrate." Pause. "I'm pretty swamped right now. Can I get back to you?" She didn't get back to me. I tried Michael next. "Hey, Dad." He sounded surprised. I'd called him, not the other way around. "Sold the business." "Wow, how do you feel about that?" "Ready for the next chapter." Another pause. "That's good. I'm happy for you." "Maybe you could come visit. I have time now. We could go fishing like we used to." We'd gone fishing exactly twice. Both times I'd spent most of the time on my phone. "I'll check my schedule," he said. He never did. That first year after retirement was the longest year of my life. I had no structure, no meetings, no deadlines, just time. All the time I'd promised myself I'd have, and nobody to spend it with. I started noticing things about the house, how empty it sounded, how my footsteps echoed. I'd walk past Emily's old room and remember her at 8 years old reading on her bed. I'd remember Michael at 12 building elaborate Lego structures on his floor. I could see them so clearly in my memory, but I couldn't remember the conversations we had, because we hadn't had many. I started texting Emily, nothing heavy, just, "Hope you're having a good week." She'd respond hours later, "Thanks, you too." I'd try again a few days later. "Saw a cardinal at the feeder, made me think of you." She used to love cardinals. "Nice." One-word responses. I tried calling Michael on his birthday. Voicemail. He texted back 6 hours later. "Thanks for the birthday wishes." I hadn't left wishes. I'd wanted to actually talk to him. Christmas came. I thought maybe they'd come home. It was the first Christmas without their mother. Emily sent a text, "Going to spend the holidays with friends this year. Hope you understand." Michael called. "I'm doing Christmas with Sarah's family." Sarah was his girlfriend. I'd never met her. "You could bring her here," I said. "It's already planned, Dad, next year." There wouldn't be a next year. We both knew it. I spent Christmas alone. I heated up one of the casseroles Emily had left in the freezer 9 months earlier. I sat at the dining room table by myself, the table that sat 8. I thought about all the Christmas mornings in this house, Emily and Michael racing down the stairs, my wife making cinnamon rolls, the living room floor covered in wrapping paper. I'd been there for those mornings, physically, but I'd also been thinking about year-end reports, about Q4 projections, about the conference call scheduled for the day after Christmas. I was there, but I wasn't present, and my kids knew it. They'd always known it. I'm 76 now. My daughter is 44, my son is 42. I haven't seen either of them in person in almost 3 years. Emily got married last spring, civil ceremony, small. She didn't invite me. She sent a card afterward with a photo, her and her husband on a beach somewhere, both of them smiling. I stared at that photo for a long time. My daughter got married and I wasn't there. Not because I was sick, not because I couldn't travel, because she didn't want me there. That's what I finally accepted. They don't want me in their lives, and I understand why. You can't be absent for 30 years and expect people to save you a seat at the table. Michael calls now and then, maybe every 6 weeks. Dutiful calls, 5-10 minutes. How's your health? Fine, and you? Good, work's busy. That's good. Okay, well, I should go. Sure, talk soon. We never do talk soon. Emily sends a text every couple months, usually something she saw that reminded her of Mom. Never anything that reminds her of me, because there isn't anything. I didn't create memories with them. I created absences. I see men my age at the diner with their adult children, meeting for breakfast, laughing, making plans. I see grandfathers at the park with toddlers, patient, present, savoring it. I see fathers at the store with their sons, just running errands, but together. I see what I don't have, and I know exactly how I lost it. It wasn't one big mistake, it was a million little choices. The recital I missed because of a client meeting that didn't even matter. The camping trip I canceled because I was too tired from work. The bedtime stories I never read because I was answering emails. The science fair where Michael won second place and I didn't even know he'd entered. The time Emily made the varsity team and came home excited to tell me, but I was on a call and held up a finger, just a minute, and by the time I finished, she'd gone to her room. Each moment seemed small, survivable. I'll make it up to them, I thought. Tomorrow, next week, next year, when things settle down. But things never settled down. And before I knew it, they were grown. Before I knew it, they were gone. Before I knew it, I was 76 years old and alone. My doctor says I'm in good health for my age. Could have another 10 years, maybe 15 if I'm lucky. 10 years. That seems like a long time when I think about all the hours I wasted in meetings that didn't matter. It seems impossibly short when I think about all the conversations I'll never have with my children. I thought about reaching out, really reaching out, writing them letters, apologizing, trying to explain. But what would I say? I'm sorry I chose work over you? They already know that. I'm sorry I missed your childhood. Can't get that back. I'm sorry I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. Too late now. Some things you can't fix. Some damage is permanent. I think about my wife sometimes, how patient she was, how many chances she gave me. They need you, she'd say. I'm doing this for them, I'd say. They need you, not your money. But I didn't listen. I thought success was the same as love. I thought providing was the same as parenting. I thought there would be more time. There's something nobody tells you about aging. It's not the physical decline that hurts most. It's the accumulation of regret. Every year it gets heavier. Every birthday you count not just the years you've lived, but the moments you've lost. I have so many moments I can't get back. Emily learning to ride a bike, Michael's first day of high school, dance recitals and baseball games and debate tournaments, and 1,000 ordinary Tuesdays that I thought didn't matter. They mattered. They were everything, and I missed them. I sit in this house now, the house that's worth $500,000, and I'd trade every penny to go back, to be at that kindergarten graduation on time, to read those bedtime stories, to look at those drawings and actually see them, to put down my phone at that Yale celebration dinner and really look at my son, to tell my wife she was right, to choose my family over a conference call, just once. I can't go back. That's what I need you to understand. I can't fix this. I can't apologize my way into my children's lives. I can't buy back the time I sold. I made my choices, and now I'm living with them. Alone. If you're reading this, if you're listening to an old man talk about his regrets, I want to tell you something. Not advice. I don't have the right to give advice. Just the truth. Your children won't remember how much money you made. They won't care about your job title or your business success. They'll remember whether you showed up. They'll remember whether you listened. They'll remember whether you chose them. Not once, not on special occasions. Every day. In the small moments, the ordinary ones. Those are the moments that build a relationship. Those are the moments that earn you a phone call when they're grown. I didn't understand that until it was too late. I thought I had time. I thought I could make it up later. I thought they would understand. They did understand. They understood I had priorities, and they weren't at the top of the list. So now I'm here. 76 years old. Healthy, wealthy, alone. The phone doesn't ring. The house is quiet. And I finally understand why. I taught them I was too busy for them, and now they're too busy for me. That's fair, I suppose. That's what I earned. I don't expect your pity. I don't want your sympathy. I'm telling you this because maybe you still have time. Maybe your kids are still young enough to remember you showed up. Maybe they're still asking you to come to things, still showing you their drawings, still wanting to tell you about their day. Don't wait. Don't think you'll have more time later. You won't. Time moves in one direction, and it moves faster than you think. The meeting can wait. The email can wait. The deal can wait. Your children can't. They won't stay small forever. They won't need you forever. And one day, you'll be my age, sitting alone, wondering where it all went, wondering when your child stopped calling. I can tell you when. It's when you stopped showing up. I'm 76 years old. I have a beautiful house, a healthy bank account, and a successful career behind me. And I'd give it all up, every last cent, every achievement, every square foot of this empty house for one more chance to read my son a bedtime story. One more chance to watch my daughter's piano recital. One more Tuesday evening as a family. But I can't have that. So I'm telling you instead. While you still can, choose them before it's too late, before the silence becomes permanent, before you understand why they stopped calling.